think that I'm live in Civil War Faces. I'm not 100% sure. I'm running it with a new phone that I've never ran live with. So, Melissa's I'm sideways? Okay. So, let's see here if I can fix that. Back another way and fix it.
Yes.
I'm up right now. Awesome. We gotta back up just a little bit. All right, guys. My phone has gone a little nuts tonight. It had me sideways for a minute. I'm using the iPhone, and it had my direction kind of tilted the wrong way. So I'm kind of coming in at you sideways and trying to fix that as we speak. And I apologize about that. Well, welcome to Caretakers. My name is Jason Pate. I am here from Union City, Tennessee, and this is coming from the Civil War Photo Collecting Society, directed by Mr. Doug York and Mr. Ron Connington. And I'm a new collector. I've been at this around 3 years, and so I still consider myself extremely new. I think that those who I talk to who have been at this for 20 years, I think they still consider themselves new because it always feels like there's so much to learn. Well, I'll kind of move this over so we can see a little bit better here. So I'll wait for everybody to kind of get in the room and we'll get started. While we're doing that, I want to go ahead and say thank you. I never really got the chance to come out and publicly say thank you enough. When you guys stepped up and you were there for my students, as Ron pointed out, I am the 7th and 8th grade teacher at Lake Road Elementary in Union City, Tennessee. And you guys had us in the Military Image magazine. And for that, we are greatly, greatly appreciative. And so it was really nice because my students felt like celebrities. They were on the front page of the local newspaper. On top of that, they made it to the front page of the district website. And on top of that, they were all shown throughout Facebook. And in my world of education, a lot of times when students get on live, they get on like a front pages for sports and athletics. And to see my students get recognized for academics was absolutely fantastic. And so that was never had happened if it had not been for you. So tonight I want to focus on my 3 areas that I like to collect. I like to collect, first off, I'm a Tennessean, so anything that I can do that is Tennessee, I love, and put the focus in Obion County. I love to collect things that have to do with disability, people or death. And also I like to collect things that are associated with paper. So that I can have the actual photo that goes with the paper. Hey Rick, and hello Kevin and Richard. Glad to have you guys with me tonight. So the first question that we're going to look at tonight is how in the world did I become interested into Civil War photography? And I wish that my story was as good as a lot of y'all's and that I had a really good backstory, but I don't. Mine's kind of necessity meets like discovery. So what happened with us is about 3 years ago when I started this, my wife was actually going through a lot of health issues. She had been diagnosed with Crohn's. She had just been diagnosed with a rare liver disease that's incurable, and she had just developed schizophrenia. So I was only working part-time, and I was substitute teaching. And so I was selling like ephemera snapshots through the ephemera groups on Facebook, and I was just trying to make $3 or $4 at a time and pushing it out as much as I could to supplement. And I was in an antique store buying these snapshots, and I looked over and there's this little black box, and I look at it, has all these kind of weird shapes on it. Now I know it's a geometric case, but at the time I didn't know what it was. And I sent a picture off to a guy named Steve McConnell, who was at Vintage Photos R Us, and I said, hey, I think I found something from the Civil War, and he wrote back and said, hey, I want to pay you for that. And immediately I was hooked because I made more on that case than I did selling snapshots all day. And so I started going to the local antique stores, and I was buying every tin type, every Ambro, every dag that I could find. And I was taking them apart if they looked crappy, and I was playing with the glass, and I was trying to clean them up, and I was trying to do everything. And then I had this idea that I was going to try to learn how to clean dags, which was a horrible mistake. If you're a new collector and you get a dag in, please just send that on to the professional. I promise you that you don't want to ruin as many images as I did trying to experiment, is what I called it, on the dags. Just send them off to get resealed by someone who knows. And so that was what I was doing. So what happened then is the woman of the antique shop sees me coming in and buying all these tin types and all these dags and Ambros, and she says, "Hey, can I show you something that I have in my personal collection?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And lo and behold, she pulls this out. This right here, Louisiana soldier, armed Confederate. And my brain automatically blew. Now, at the time, I had no idea what this was. I had no idea whatsoever. But here's the kicker, is I'm going to let that sit right there so you can see it. But not only did it come with this, my first find also came with the civilian image of him as well. So we have the half-plate Ambro of the armed soldier, and this is my first pick, which I was blessed beyond belief. I was so green at the time, I had no idea whether this was a Union or a Reb. And I get on Civil War Faces, which is where we are tonight, kind of full circle, and I post, I found this, I think it's from New York, and immediately my inbox gets blown up. And it was funny because some people are like, "Hey, I'll pay you $50 for these." And then immediately I was hit by 2 or 3 guys who were really honest with me, said, "Hey, you got something special there. You don't know it, but you do." And I made 2 of my mentors out of these images. One being Kevin Canberg and the other being Rick Brown. And Rick, after a few exchanges, actually owns these 2 images now. So it's great. We're still working on identifying these 2 guys, and one day we will get them identified. And I've tried to keep up with them as they've been out. But these are my first 2 owned by the Rick Brown collection today. So I ended up continuing to buy Civil War images. And at this point, I am in full-blown mode because I've just made a pretty heavy profit off of these 2. And it's enough to feed my family. And when I say feed my family, that's about where we are in my life at the moment. I'm feeding my family with this. And so as a new collector, I want to say it's so important that you develop and get mentors who help you. Because there's no way you can walk into this alone and ever try to get this right. And if you are a more experienced collector, try to put someone under your wing. And I know it's tedious. I don't know how many civilian images from the 1880s at first that I sent Rick and Kevin and Doug York and said, "Hey, is this a soldier?" only for it to be like 30 years too late and definitely not even nowhere close. But they stayed with me and helped me and developed me, and I don't think that I would be anywhere I would be now if it had not been for Steve McConnell, Rick Brown, Kevin Canberg, and Doug York. And those 4 guys coming up beside me and developing me made all the difference. So about a month or 2 passes, and I'm buying these things up left and right, and the woman at the antique store, no joke, calls back and says, "Hey, this guy has a photo laying around in his house, and it's a soldier, and I thought you might be interested." And lo and behold, here he is, my second large pick. Same woman, same antique shop, quad-armed Confederate cavalry, now owned by Phil McCoy. And we now believe this possibly could actually be out of the Union City. And it actually came with a piece out of the Bible, the family Bible that was in, We've retracked that family Bible now to the 7th Tennessee Cav, CSA, more than likely. And once again, once 2 of these images landed for me, I was hook, line, and sinker all the way in, 100% in now, and looking forward to finding everything. And I became an addict, no doubt. And at this point, though, I'm still not what I would consider a collector. I'm not keeping anything. Everything that I touch, I'm selling because I just couldn't afford at the moment to not do that. I was literally going to either feed my family or keep a photo. And so I was selling everything that I was touching. Well, a little time comes to pass, and the same woman, same antique store, calls me back, and she says, I have a whole album in the back. And they were CDV album, and it was a Tennessee album, loaded with Tennessee and Nashville images. And then my heart saw this. This one right here, which I still have right over here. And it's a Nashville image of the Capitol building. And seeing the tents and seeing all of this finally spoke to my heart as a Tennessean. I ended up financially having to sell the rest of the album out, and I got to keep this one and a lithograph of the Hermitage, which I'll show you later. And this is the image that made me a collector. This is the image when I looked at it and said, okay, I have to quit selling, and I have to start keeping history of my own state, because if I don't, I'm afraid no one else will. And so this image here is the image that switched me from just a seller to a collector. And I was thrilled to show you guys and get to keep that one myself. So, as I told you before, my wife has developed, that's going to fly, hold it in my knee there. My wife has developed 3 illnesses, and none of them are curable. 2 of them are treatable, and the other one is really neither treatable or curable. And we just kind of have to play it out with her body. And so, due to that, I found myself being drawn to images of disability. And the reason I like collecting photos is I call it the trifecta of emotion. I think that Civil War collectors and photo collectors, we have something that a lot of people don't, and that's the emotion side of this. Because we are connected emotionally by 3 people. In 1860, there was someone there who was trying to express themselves. Then there was an artist trying to display what they were trying to show with their emotions. And then there's us in 2020, still trying to express ourselves. And with the mixture of us trying to express ourselves, them expressing their self 150, 160 years ago, and then the artist, all 3 of us are captivated by this single image, and we resonate with someone in the past. And I think that's what makes this a hobby so addicting, is it's a socialized. Like once you hold a button, like how many buttons can you really have? How many emotional parts can you hold? Not to down that collecting, but we're so much more emotionally driven as a collection. And so I like to collect images of disability. And so I'd like to show you a few of mine that I have. The first is a quarter plate tin of a man who is with his doctor. The doctor is holding his eye exam. And once you get the picture a little bit closer, you can get into his eyes and see there's some definite issues with his eyes. We have the eye doctor piece with the eye issue. And the way he's positioned makes me believe that he's probably blind. And so I was thrilled to get to have this picture as well. So it's a little easier to get that up there to you than it would be if I just got the other image. So this is one of my favorite ones that I've gotten the last year or so. My second favorite, probably my top 5 favorite images for me, is this gentleman right here. And when you get the photo a little bit closer, I'm going to get a little bit closer scan there, and then also pull this one up there, you can see a little bit. He has almond eyes. He has a head that is larger than the rest of his body. His hands are not proportionate as well. And these are all symptoms that we see in Down syndrome. This is taken by Keenan of Philadelphia. And this young man, at this point, a lot of people don't know that it was something called post-birth abortion. And it happened with children in the 1860s and before that, people who were born with Down syndrome. And they thought it was okay and merciful to actually remove the child from life. And I love this image because I worked with adults with disabilities, many adults with Down syndrome at one point. And I found that they enjoy life so much more than we ever can. And I also thought it was timely because this is also a demographic who is still fighting for their rights. Statistically, children who are born with Down syndrome are highly likely to be aborted, more than the non-Down syndrome, just for an extra or lack of chromosome. And so I just wanted to share that's one of my favorite ones. Going to a image with the military background. This is Augustus IV. This is the CDV of him. And this is blown up so you can see. Augustus was with the 11th Kentucky Cavalry, USA. We don't know exactly what happened to him. But what we do know is after one of the battles, his medical records are shown that he has insanity. And he develops what I believe is PTSD. After the war, I continued to chase after his medical records and searching everything that I could to find anything to do with him because I was intrigued with him. And what I found is that Augustus stayed in mental hospitals and asylums on and off the rest of his life. And that he would eventually die at a very early age inside of an asylum. And I thought it was timely today, with the day being the anniversary of D-Day, and say that PTSD is such a real thing. I don't think they really understood it as much in 1860 as we do today, and we're still learning about it. But it seems that right after one of the battles, his brain just kind of breaks down. And so if you're someone who has served in the military, we say thank you. And if you're someone who has PTSD, please know that you're not alone and that you can go get help, and that you have a lot of people who are cheering you on. The next is actually a disability piece, which is my favorite piece in my collection. This one right here, and try to get a little bit closer for you. This is a picture of Susan Gotze. Susan Gotze lived in my county, probably about 5 miles from my house during the Civil War. The man in the background, I believe, is C.P. Glover. Susan had developed a series of vomiting, and also she developed seizures. They called in a medical doctor to take care of her. He gave her a concoction. A few days after the concoction, she starts to go into a coma-like state. The odd part is, every day she goes into a coma for 23 hours and 50 minutes. She wakes up at noon every day for 10 minutes and then is back in a coma. They brought her doctors from all over the world. And at one point, Barnum and Bailey tried to buy her while she's alive. And the guy in the back, this is her doctor, C.P. Glover, was the doctor in Obion Weekly and also Lake, which was part of Obion County at that time. When the Union soldiers moved into our area of Tennessee, they needed doctors. And immediately they go to find CP. CP refused to work for the Union Army. And they go to his house and they begin to shoot up his house and leave bullet holes stricken through his house. And then that door recently was accidentally destroyed. The family member saw it, thought it was an old piece of scrap lumber, threw it in a pile, the burn pile, and accidentally burned the door that was shot up by the Union Army as they came through. On top of that, a few weeks later, the Union Army repaid him a visit. And they told him they were going to steal all his horses and take everything. And he begged them to leave a horse for him because he had to care for his patients, including also Miss Gotze. and they ended up leaving him the most broken and old mule that they could find. And the Union Army, when they moved in this area, took everything from him. So a nice civilian image with a good story about what happened there. This one right here is this is a picture of Wellington Lee, 3rd Missouri Cav. And what happened with him is this is troops in Nashville. While he was with his men, one of his men were cleaning his gun, did not realize that it could be discharged. And it was discharged. And when it was discharged, it shot Wellington in the abdomen. And so he was literally killed around a campfire. They rushed him to the doctor, and when they did that in Alabama, he would pass away soon later. And so while friendly fire was definitely part of battles, this was friendly fire around a campfire. And recently I was able to track down the rest of his family, and I was able to reunite him with his wife and his 2 children. And so that was one of my favorite moments, is to be able to reunite him with his family images as well. The other thing that I like to do, as I told you, is I like to collect images that have something to do with paper. And to me, there is something special about getting to do that. And so the very first thing that I wanted to show you was about a guy called Captain Lunt. Inside of a package one day that I had bought as Civil War documents was this little letter. I opened the letter up and began to read about it from a nurse who was writing to a wife about the death of her husband after he developed meningitis. So I went back with the transcribing of it so I could actually understand what was occurring. And I would like to read you a section from his letter, the letter from the nurse to his wife. He was gentle as an angel, even in delirium of fever, and always submitted to the sisters with his sweetness. I never saw anyone suffering from brain fever so well, and always behaved as a gentleman. His mind seemed fixed on home. He seldom spoke of anything else, and he was always thought himself in the bosom of his family, that it was his little daughter who spoke to him, his wife who tended to him. So I began to look up about Mr. Lunt, Captain Lunt, and I wanted to see if there was any images of him. I was captivated by the story of a man who, in the last few minutes of his life, had imagined his wife and daughter caring for him instead of the nurses. And lo and behold, this popped up. And I immediately fell in love. Here he is with the same daughter in that letter that he writes that he believes is caring for him and who he talks to and cries out to at night in his pain. And I do not own this image, although I do have the rights to share it. The family owns this image, and though I have tried to buy it multiple times from them, they have not given me the ability to buy this yet. They want to keep it in the family. But they did give me the rights to share that. And so one of my favorite pieces to put together, to know that, it was just, I actually, as a teacher, I brought that letter into my classroom and I had my students read it. And then what I did was I showed them this picture. And I think I had about 2 of the girls that cried, and all the boys were actually quiet for once. And as an educator, I think it's vital that we take real documents with real photos to these students. And I even had one student said, Coach Pate, I didn't realize that they were real people. And I said, yes, every one of them were real people who had real emotions just like us. And so if you're an educator today, I would highly encourage you to go and do this with your students. Make them understand that this is alive. If you're a parent of a student, please take the time to develop letters and match them with photographs. Help our students understand, and your students understand, that these are real people who went through real issues. The next picture that I was going to show you actually is a knife plate tintype of a soldier out of Iowa. Let me go ahead and pull everything up. This is William Elder. I picked this up from Southern Historical, and it had the knife plate came with, once again, a letter. And so I began to go and read the letter, and I began to track his movements from the time that he left Iowa until the time that he reaches Benton Barracks, which is where this is taken. In the letter, it discusses their poverty at home. And little sister is begging for money to buy his sheep. Dad has paid off, has debt to pay off, and he's having to ask his adult son to help pay. And as I read the letter, poverty stroked my mind so many times, and it finally realized to me that this is very likely the very first time that he had his picture taken. His unit, his regiment, was only in Benton Barracks for one day, it appears. And while they were in Benton Barracks, he had this picture taken and sitting back with the following letter to his family. And could you imagine the sight of being the very first time that you saw a photo, the very first time you saw a camera? And this is very likely for him, and he sent it home. And I was thrilled to get to be at this piece and study a lot of his family history as well. The next image that I have is actually post-war, and it is of Mr. James Pollock. And James is going to come into this country as an adult, as an immigrant. And while he is here, he falls in love with America. And while he's in America, his family decides to move west. And he later will ask for citizenship and become a citizen. After becoming a citizen, at an older age, he actually signs up for the Missouri Army to fight for the United States. Even though he could clearly say, this is not my war, he was a natural citizen, he felt like, and he was going to fight for his new country that he had just become a part of. The nice part about him is I do have his discharge papers, because he got sick and was not able to make it. But inside of his stuff that I got him was this right here. Upon his older age, he had recorded his childhood into a paper that his son would record for him. And he discussed in detail what it was like to be on the Oregon Trail, what it was like to move west, and what it was like to be a child in this time frame. And so I thought I would go and just kind of read you a small excerpt from that that really spoke to me as I was going through this. I haven't had the time to tell all about the trip out, but one thing I'll never forget was the death of a baby belonging to one of the families and the funeral that we had. One Sunday afternoon, away out there, miles and miles from anyone, I made a casket out of a box. Mother lined it with some white cloth, and we laid the baby away. It certainly seemed hard next morning to move forward and leave it alone in its long lost sleep on the prairie. And getting to follow his history has been one of the greatest thrills for me in the last year. Knowing that this guy here loved our country so much. He wanted to become a citizen, but it wasn't enough to become a citizen. It was enough to fight for the United States of America, in his opinion. And he was willing to give all and would become later discharged medically. The last image with disability that I would like, or death, or in paper, is one I recently got off of the marketplace. This is Jasper Green of the 26th New York. Jasper did not survive the war. In fact, we know this because of the letter that I have from the Douglas Hospital from the chaplain. And in there, I've liked this one so much for one reason. In there, the chaplain writes to the parents, first off telling them that the death of their son. And then he says, I would like, if possible, all the information about this young man. And he goes into list all the different things, his occupation, his birth, his education. And it really struck me because what this chaplain was doing in 1864 is the exact same thing that we're still doing today in 2020. That we buy the image, we research him. What was his occupation? Where did he come from? What did he do? Why did he serve? What happened to them? And I think that's one of the things that we are connected to and that we get to be a part of. I also am a Tennessee collector. And so as I get that ready, I do want to give some advice that I think that needs to be said to new collectors. You need to develop a friend as a new collector. It is so vital that you develop I feel you're late. I just showed your picture a while ago. You have to walk back and watch it again. A team of people around you, mentors and also experts in the field. And there are some people out there, and what I have found is almost everyone in this community is willing to help you. You just have to be willing to ask. And also, along with new collectors, is also feel like you can give back. You know, when I first started collecting, I had nothing in information-wise to offer Doug or Rick or Kevin or Steve. I had nothing to offer them. But what I could do is I would watch all the Facebook ephemera groups that I was in. I would watch all of the eBay ads that I could. And then I knew what they liked. So as soon as I found something that I thought they liked, I would send them the link immediately. I would try to find some way to give back because they were giving so back to me. And I think at times you can become an expert in your field. And I know sometimes if you've watched The Matrix, at the end of The Matrix, when he opens the one door and he finds out there's like millions of doors, that's how it feels like in Civil War collecting, especially as a new person. But I would encourage you to find one area and really try to become an expert in it and try to understand it and learn as much as you can in that area. So just a few Tennessee images that I have laid out tonight. This one right here is Jesse Claiborne. It is on the way to my house as we speak. USPS is going to be obviously pretty slow with it, and it's perfectly fine. It'll probably be here the way they've been tracking things to my house in about 2 weeks. Jesse is going to come out of the Brownsville, Tennessee area. He is going to enlist at Sharon Station, which is in Southwest Tennessee, with the 7th Tennessee Cav CSA under Forrest. And he is going to stay with Forrest throughout the war. As 1861, his mother moves to Nashville, and he is going to go there for a bit, which this is where this image was taken after the war, and then move back to his home. Later on, he goes, I guess, to be with Mom, and he dies in Nashville. So anytime that I can get a hold of 7th Tennessee Cav under Forrest or anything to do with Forrest, I try to grab them almost every time that I can. Even if it's not in uniform, they still mean a whole lot to me. So this one right here is one that I've really enjoyed. It's a quarter plate amber type out of Jonesboro, Tennessee, which is near the North Carolina border. It is an East Tennessee photo. And as you notice there, he's a new recruit, got some of his uniform, put it on, and couldn't wait to get to the photographer to get his picture taken. And I have loved owning this one, and I use this one in my class. Students understand the division that was in Tennessee, the West being much more Confederate and the East being much more federal. This one, though, this is the one that, in case of a fire in my house, I will leave everything besides this one. This is the one that doesn't look that special. And as a new collector, I think it's important to understand that it doesn't have to be quad armed. It doesn't have to be in uniform to be special to someone. This is the one that I will chase. If it blows out, I'll probably run after it for miles and miles and miles. I'd do whatever it took to get it back if I ever lost it. This is Martin Luther McBride. Martin Luther is going to come from the Middle Tennessee area and then come to Obion County. His parents run the local grocery store in our area at that time, in the Troy area. Martin Luther, at one point, we don't know where, is going to sign up with the 7th Tennessee Cav under Forrest. He is buried in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the cemetery there for veterans. And this is why this one is so important and special to me. This image was taken in Union City. I have, knowing that this guy here served with Forrest, taken in Union City, lived in Union City, has always been extremely special to me. On top of that, my family lineage comes from the McBrides. So he is more than likely my distant cousin, although I've not been able to piece that together because the McBrides were 9 children at one point who all split out different ways. So let's see here. On Tennessee image, Mr. Tom Cock. Tom is going to serve with the 18th CSA, Tennessee. He's extremely good at what he does. He is a blacksmith by trade. He comes over and he joins the war and he stays. He fights illness consistently in and out. I recently was able to pick this one up and fell in love with him immediately, and thought I would have to. He's probably the second one that I would chase if something happened, there was a fire in the house or something. I've enjoyed him very much. There's 2 more images or 3 more images that I'd like to share with you, and then it's kind of looking through some questions that Doug and Rhonda sent me. If I can find it and pull it. It's easier to show you in this large blown up that I had. This image here is a CDV, although the CDV is here, of Columbus, Kentucky. Columbus is a very special place for me. It is where my family and I go quite often. It's only about 20 minutes from me. And where this is probably taken is one of my favorite spots to sit and watch the Mississippi River go. I also enjoy it because if you'll notice, if I can get right over here, going a little backwards so you can see everything that's there. There is an African American child right here where my finger is, if I can find it. There it is, holding a set of rifles, and probably likely just freed. This is just around the border of Tennessee, or maybe ran to the Union for help or to be a servant to get away from slavery. And I have loved this image since I had it, and getting to see many people, never get to see what it looked like in 1860, where their favorite spot is in the world. And this, to me, is one of the most important images because it's a place that I connect with my family and my kids, and one of my favorite images by far. The last image that I wanted to show you tonight was this one. And I know he does not look very special or unique. This little boy is a ruby amber type. He is a 9th plate out of Mobile, Alabama. And what I love about him is it's really hard to tell, but Jerry helped me with this. If you flip the image, you can actually see the top of that little board says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the ruby amber, mom and dad find it so important to capture his learning and his education that they take him to the photographer and all the props of everything they can give him. They believe his education is the most important. And as an educator and a teacher, this image resonates with me in so many different new ways. And it's one of the first ones I get to pull in case a visitor comes to the house and I want them to see. It's the very first one that I'll show my students when it comes time to go. And it leads me to my last bit of advice that I was taught by my mentor Kevin and Rick and so many others, which is this for new collectors and old. Always learning. Learning is power. And when you get into this, I know it feels like a waterfall hitting you. But continue to learn. If you've been doing this for 40 years, continue to learn. There's so much to go, so many uniforms, so many different variations. Take the time to learn. Take the time to share. Education always requires a teacher and it always requires a student. And be both in this field. Don't always be the student. Sometimes find someone and be the teacher. And if you're someone who's only feels like you can be a student, learn so that one day you can teach someone else. My future plans was a question. I'm currently in the middle of writing a book using a lot of these images that I showed you tonight. One of the biggest downfalls that I have found in education since becoming a teacher is there's not a lot of strong resources that break down the Civil War, who break down these hard concepts, or there's not a simple narrative to this. And don't break it down in a way that a 12 or a 13 or 14-year-old child can understand. And so my mission this summer, during this COVID season as well, is to put together a book and write it intentionally for 12-year-old children, helping them understand the war in Tennessee, and also taking these pictures that I showed you of real life people and putting them together. And I think that is one of the most important things that we can do. If you are an individual who wants to help schools, I would tell you that if you would take copies of your photos like this, and I went to the local print shop, they put it under a scanner and they blew them up tremendously where it's almost poster size. And then you wrote a small excerpt. Those teachers can begin to do education through your images. And if you're not sure how to do that, and that's something that you want to do, my messenger is open 24/7 for you, and I will be glad to help you walk through that. If you're trying to homeschool your child during the COVID and you need someone to help you do that, and you want to use Civil War images, please let me know so that I can help you. And that's one of my goals, is to help educators and also help parents understand how this works. And so thank you for joining me tonight. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. No, just absolutely tremendous, amazing images, except for the ones who are not owned by me. But hopefully some good stories. Those that'll resonate with you and you can carry on and go out and find those images. If you're a new collector, dig, 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 and constantly get ready to go. And if you're an older collector, give. Give education, give time. And to those who have mentored me and are my friends, I owe you the world. Civil War collecting has probably been my ground for the last 3 years. Dealing with a wife who has disabled and becoming a caretaker of a spouse at age 31, 30 at 28 at the time, and having a child with delays as well, and also working 3 jobs. I found that this area here and the people in the community are probably what kept me afloat and not make me lose my mind. And so thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. And thank you once again to the community who helped my students become a Military Image magazine. You gave them an opportunity that I literally get stopped at the doctor's office on a regular basis, and someone will stop me at the doctor's office and say, "Aren't you the teacher who had those kids in that magazine?" And it's been months now, and you impacted not only my students, but you impacted my school, and you impacted my community. So thank you for that. And well wishes, and stay healthy and stay safe, my friends.